Carmen's voice was careful in the way that careful voices get when the information is serious and the attorney knows her client well enough to deliver it straight. The complaint references a patient identified as Choi S., she said. Female, 78, geriatric ward. They allege you administered incorrect medication dosage on 2 separate occasions and failed to document a fall incident. Denise said nothing. Let her finish. The problem, Carmen continued, is that the patient file they're referencing, the one attached to the complaint, is not the original file. It's been altered. I'm looking at 2 versions right now. One pulled through the hospital's archive system, which I accessed through a medical records attorney contact in Seoul, and one submitted with the complaint. They differ in 4 specific places. How recently were the alterations made? The metadata on the complaint version was scrubbed, but the archival version has a timestamp chain going back 6 years, completely unbroken. A pause. Whoever did this didn't know the original was accessible through a secondary archive channel. They only targeted the primary record. Denise sat very still. Carmen. Who had access to the primary record? That's the question. A sound of papers. According to the hospital's access log, which I also got, the primary record was accessed remotely 11 days ago, from a US-based IP address. 11 days ago. Before Haun was admitted. Before any of this had started visibly. Someone was preparing this before I even walked into this hospital, Denise said. Yes, Carmen said. This was not reactive. This was built in advance and waiting for a trigger. Denise thought about that. About the specific coldness of it. About someone sitting 11 days ago at a computer, reaching across an ocean into a medical record, placing lies inside it with the patience of someone who had decided the outcome before the event began. The IP address, Denise said. Can it be traced? It routes through a VPN service. But the service provider is subpoenable in a civil action. Carmen paused. Denise. If we go that direction, this becomes a legal proceeding. Public. It will get louder before it gets quieter. I know. And your name stays in the story longer. I know that too. A pause. What do you want to do? Carmen asked. Denise looked at Haun. The child had shifted in her sleep and one arm was extended outside the blanket, her small hand open and reaching toward nothing in particular the way children's hands do when they are deeply under. I want the record corrected, Denise said. Formally. Permanently. I want every institution that received the complaint to also receive documentation of the alteration. And I want it on file that this was manufactured, with dates and access logs, so that it cannot be resurrected quietly later. That I can do, Carmen said. The civil action for damages is separate, and we can decide about that later. Yes. Later. I'll file the formal response to the nursing board tonight, with the archival documentation attached. Thank you. She ended the call. Set the phone down. She sat with the information for a full minute, not processing it emotionally. She had already done that at the window earlier. The part of this that hurt had already been felt. Now she was in the part that required something different. Precision. Patience. The long, unglamorous work of being right in writing and in record so that the truth had somewhere to live permanently. She knew how this went. She had seen it before in smaller forms. The first filing always landed harder than the correction. The headline always moved faster than the retraction. The people who heard her name attached to the word disgraced would outnumber the people who later heard the word fabricated by a significant margin. That was simply how it worked. And she had long since stopped needing the world to be fair in order to function in it. The door opened. Eugene. Alone. She closed the door behind her and stood near it. She was not the same as she had been this morning. The coat was gone, draped somewhere. Her hair, which had been perfectly placed when she arrived, had shifted. She looked like someone who had been making difficult calls in difficult conversations for several hours and had stopped caring about the surface presentation somewhere in the middle of it. She looked at Denise. Then at Haun. He went to the board meeting, she said. I know. Did he tell you about David Lim? Yes. Eugene moved to the chair at the foot of the bed. The farthest one. She sat down slowly, like her body was heavier than it had been that morning. I made a mistake, she said. Denise waited. Not a mistake in judgment. I knew what I was doing. I mean, I made an error. She looked at her hands. I gave Lim access to the soul records to use against you if necessary. I didn't know he had already built a separate structure around Min Jae. I thought I was protecting our position. I didn't know I was handing him a door. What's in the second file? Denise asked. Eugene looked up. I don't know, she said. That's what frightens me. The honesty was stark, unbeautified. If I had to guess, Denise said, it's something that connects you directly to Lim's communication. Proof of coordination. Which would make you not just a witness to whatever he's built but a participant. Eugene's face didn't change. But something behind her eyes did. You would lose too, Denise said. If this goes the way Lim intends. Not just Min Jae. You. Yes, Eugene said quietly. I understand that now. A long silence. Haun made a small sound. Both women looked at her. She settled. Why did you come back in here? Denise asked. You could have stayed in the waiting room. You could have gone home. Eugene looked at her daughter. Because she's here, she said. Simply. And then, quieter, directed not quite at Denise but near her. And because I've been doing things in distant rooms that I'm ashamed of. And I didn't want to be in a distant room anymore. Denise said nothing. She didn't offer comfort. She didn't offer absolution. She simply let the statement exist in the room without rushing past it. Then her phone buzzed. Min Jae. One text. Come to the hospital conference room. Ground floor. Now. Bring whatever documentation you have. She looked at Eugene. Stay with her, Denise said. She stood. And walked out. The conference room on the ground floor was not meant for this. It was a medium-sized room with a long table designed for care coordination meetings and insurance reviews and the polite, administrative business of keeping a hospital running. There was a projector screen no one had lowered and a whiteboard with old marker residue and chairs that did not match because they had been accumulated over years from different departments. 3 men in suits sat on one side of the table. Min Jae stood at the end. And beside him, which Denise had not expected, was a woman she didn't recognize. 50s. Reading glasses pushed up on her head. The specific calm of someone who had spent a career in rooms where a great deal was at stake and had stopped being impressed by any of it. Ms. Walker, Min Jae said when she came in. This is Catherine Hale. She's been my legal counsel for 11 years. Catherine Hale nodded at Denise with the brisk efficiency of someone who assessed situations rapidly. Your attorney filed the nursing board response 20 minutes ago, Catherine said. I've already been in contact with Carmen Rodriguez. We're coordinating. Denise looked at Min Jae. He had been busy. Sit down, Catherine said, to the room rather than any specific person. The 3 men on the other side of the table, board members, Denise understood, shifted in their chairs. They had the particular discomfort of men who had arrived expecting to hold all the information and had discovered mid-meeting that they did not. Denise sat. Min Jae sat beside her. The complaint against Ms. Walker, Catherine began, was filed using an altered medical record. We have the original archive version, the access log showing remote entry 11 days ago, and a forensic document comparison showing 4 specific alterations. She slid a folder across the table. The complaint is not only false. It was manufactured with premeditation, using a US-based device, coordinated with the timing of this board meeting. That coordination is documented. The board member in the center, older, silver-haired, the one who had the posture of someone used to being the most senior person in a room, looked at the folder. Who coordinated it? He said. Catherine looked at Min Jae. He took over. David Lim, he said. The center board member's expression shifted fractionally. Lim was brought into this advisory process. Through a channel I approved without sufficient vetting, Min Jae said. I've acknowledged that. But his access to board communications was limited. He shouldn't have been able to build what he built without inside cooperation. He paused. Which brings us to the second file. The three men exchanged a look. The second file, Min-jae continued, which was submitted to this board allegedly as an anonymous internal disclosure, contains financial documentation that has been selectively edited to suggest I authorized transactions I did not authorize. He slid his own folder across the table. The unedited versions of those same documents, with full timestamp chains, show a different picture entirely. One that points not at me, but at the routing account Lim set up 8 months ago through a subsidiary I had no direct involvement in. Silence. Real silence. The kind that happens when people who arrived certain are becoming uncertain. Denise watched the three men. Watched how they held the folders. Watched where their eyes went. The man on the left had known about Lim. She was almost certain of it. The specific way he was not reacting to the name. There's one more element, Catherine said. She looked at Denise. Denise opened the folder she had brought. Her own record. Clean. Complete. 12 years of documentation, commendations, patient outcomes, professional reviews. She placed it in the center of the table. Disgraced, she said quietly. That was the word used in this evening's press release. She looked at each man in turn. I want to be clear about what my record actually shows. And I want it understood that whatever narrative was built using my name, it was built on a fabrication that has now been formally documented as such. Nobody spoke. I didn't ask to be in this room, she continued. I didn't ask to be in this hospital, in this situation, with my name in a headline. I was here because a child needed someone. That's it. That's the full extent of my involvement. She paused. But since my name has been used as a tool, I'm going to make sure the tool leaves a mark on the people who picked it up. Catherine's mouth moved very slightly at one corner. The center board member set down his folder. What exactly are you proposing? He said. She's proposing nothing, Catherine said. She's informing. The proposal is mine. She folded her hands. By 9 o'clock tonight, Lim's advisory contract is terminated for cause. The press release is formally retracted with a correction that includes Ms. Walker's name and record, and the board agrees to an independent audit of the subsidiary account. In return, Mr. Choi does not pursue civil action against the board members present for their role in advancing a meeting predicated on fabricated documentation. The men looked at each other. The one on the left started to speak. Don't, said Min-jae. Quietly. Without heat. We've known each other a long time. Don't say something tonight that you can't take back tomorrow. A long pause. Then the center board member nodded. Once. Slowly. The meeting was effectively over in the way that meetings end when one side has run out of position. Forms would follow. Documents would be signed. The machinery would complete itself over the next several days through proper channels. But the core of it was done. Denise sat still while Catherine and Min-jae handled the remaining details. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel relieved. Exactly. She felt the specific quiet that comes after a sustained effort. The moment when the thing you were holding can finally be set down. When the board members filed out, Min-jae sat back in his chair. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then at Denise. Thank you, he said. For being here. For all of it. She looked at him. Your grandmother would have handled that room very well, she said. He laughed. A real one. Sudden and brief and genuine. She would have ended it in half the time, he said. Then the laugh faded. I need to go back upstairs, he said. And I need to talk to Eugene. Yes, Denise said. You do. He stood. Paused. What she did to you, he started, is between me and her, Denise said. When she's ready. He nodded. Accepted that. He left. Denise sat alone at the long table. Picked up her phone. 3 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize. She called it back. A woman's voice answered. Professional. A journalist. Ms. Walker, I'm doing a follow-up piece on the Choi Enterprises story. I understand you have documentation that contradicts the initial report. Would you be willing to? Denise ended the call. Set the phone face down. Sat in the quiet. Then picked it back up and texted Carmen. No press. Full correction through official channels only. Agreed. Carmen replied in under a minute. Agreed. Already told them no comment. But Denise, there's something else. Something in the archive I didn't mention on the phone because I needed to confirm it first. Denise stared at the message. Carmen again, 2 seconds later. Soon he amended her personal directive 4 months before she died. She left something for you. It was never delivered. I found the notation in the hospital records. Someone intercepted it. If you've ever had to stand alone to protect your dignity, this channel was made for you. The notation was 3 lines. Carmen read it to her over the phone, standing outside the conference room in the hospital corridor at 9:40 in the evening. The fluorescent lights doing what fluorescent lights always did, and the sound of the hospital moving around her without stopping for any of this. Patient Directive Amendment. Choi Soon-hee. Personal effects and written correspondence to be delivered to attending nurse Denise Walker, American National. Contents. 1 letter. Handwritten. 1 item. Described as a personal keepsake. Delivery attempted. Recipient could not be located through hospital records at time of discharge process. Could not be located. Because she had already been removed. Denise stood still. She thought about the prescription slip with the poem she had never been able to read. She had kept it. Carried it across 3 moves and 2 countries in a small box with other things that mattered in ways she couldn't always explain. She still had it. And there was more. A letter. A keepsake. Things an old woman had specifically designated for her and that had disappeared into the administrative gap left by her abrupt removal. Where are they now? Denise asked. The hospital logged them as undeliverable and transferred them to the estate, which at that point was managed by the family. Carmen paused. Specifically, per the estate records, they were received by the family's legal representative in Seoul. Do you know who that was? The name on the receipt is Choi Min-jae. Denise was quiet for a long moment. He received them, she said. The signature is his. Whether he knew what they were or whether they passed through his hands without examination, I can't tell you. The receipt only confirms delivery to his representative. She thanked Carmen, ended the call, stood in the corridor. This was different from the complaint, different from the headline. This was not a weapon someone had built and pointed at her. This was something an old woman had tried to give her. Something that had been interrupted. She didn't know how to feel about it yet, so she didn't try. She walked back to the elevator, pressed 4, rode up. When she stepped off, she could hear voices from down the hall. The room. Min-jae and Eugene. Not shouting, but not quiet either. The specific register of 2 people having the conversation they had been avoiding for longer than just today. She stopped outside the door. She could hear enough. Min-jae, you went to Lim. You gave him everything. Without telling me. Eugene, her voice different from anything Denise had heard from her yet, stripped of the composure, bare underneath. I was trying to protect what we built. By destroying someone who did nothing to us. I was afraid. Min-jae. I was afraid and you were not seeing it. A silence. Then Min-jae. Afraid of what? Afraid of a nurse. Afraid of everything she made visible. Eugene's voice broke slightly. Ha-eun reached for her. Our daughter, who we have given every material thing she has ever asked for, reached for a stranger before she reached for either of us. And you want to tell me that wasn't something? You want to tell me that didn't mean anything? Silence. Long. Then Min-jae, quietly. It meant we weren't there. Yes, Eugene said. It meant we weren't there. Denise stepped back from the door. She was not supposed to have heard that. Or maybe it didn't matter whether she was supposed to or not. She had heard it, and it had landed somewhere real. She went to the nurse's station. Made a note in Ha-eun's chart. Checked in with the night nurse taking over the floor. Did the small, functional things that kept her hands occupied and her presence useful. When she came back past the room, the voices had stopped. She knocked. Min-jae opened the door. He looked at her face. What happened? He said. She came in. Eugene was sitting in the chair closest to Ha-eun. She looked like she had been crying recently, or close to it, in the particular way that people who don't cry often look when they have. Slightly undone, slightly relieved, slightly exposed. Ha-eun was awake. She was watching Denise with those clear, calm eyes. Denise came to the bedside. She looked at Min-jae. "Your grandmother left something for me," she said. "A letter. A personal item. She designated them for me before she died." The room went completely still. "They were transferred to your estate," she said. "Signed for by your legal representative." Min-jae's face changed slowly. Not guilt this time. Not the guilt of commission, the guilt of omission. The specific devastation of realizing something passed through your hands and you didn't see it because you weren't looking. "I didn't know," he said. She looked at him. "I know you didn't," she said. "That's not why I'm telling you." "Then why?" "Because I want them," she said. Simply. Whatever she left for me, I want it. Not as a claim. Not as leverage. Because she was a good woman and she meant to give me something, and it was taken from the path between her hands and mine. She paused. And I think she deserves for it to arrive. Min-jae stood very still. Then he said, "I'll find them. I'll have them to you within 48 hours. I promise." Eugene had not moved through any of this. Denise looked at her now. Eugene met her eyes. The woman who had said, "I'm still afraid. And I'm not ready to apologize for something I haven't stopped doing." She looked, right now, like she had stopped. "The complaint will be formally withdrawn," Denise said. "The correction will go out through official channels. My record stands." She said it without triumph. "I need you to understand that it was never about the record. It was about whether the truth of someone's life can be overwritten by whoever has better access to the system." Eugene looked at her hands. "It can't," Denise said. "Not permanently." Ha-eun reached up and took Denise's hand. All three adults looked at the child. She wasn't looking at any of them. She was looking at the ceiling with the distant focus of a child who is thinking about something far away. Then she said, in her small, precise voice, "Will you come back? After you leave?" The room held its breath. Denise looked at this child who had started all of this simply by crying alone in a room until someone came. "I'll always come when someone needs me," she said. "That's just who I am." Ha-eun nodded. Satisfied. The way children are satisfied by an answer that is honest, even if it isn't everything. She closed her eyes. Min-jae sat down beside his daughter. He took her free hand. He held it the way he should have been holding it 31 hours ago, and he didn't look away from her face. Eugene looked at Denise. One look. Unguarded. No performance in it. She said nothing, but she nodded. And Denise understood what the nod meant, even without the words that would eventually have to follow it. The words would come. Or they wouldn't. That was Eugene's to carry. Denise picked up her bag. She was nearly at the door when Min-jae spoke. "The letter," he said without turning around. "She wrote it in English. For you. She had someone help her." Denise stopped, her hand on the doorframe. "How do you know?" she asked. A pause. "Because I read it," he said. "When it came. I didn't know who she'd written it to. I read it and I didn't understand why she'd written it in English." He stopped. "I understand now." Denise stood at the door. "What did it say?" she asked. "Very quiet." He turned then. Looked at her directly across the room. "She said you were the first person who ever held her hand like it mattered," he said. "Not like duty. Not like routine. Like it actually mattered." The corridor behind Denise was ordinary. Fluorescent. Moving. She stayed in the doorway one more second. Then she walked out. She did not look back. Not because she didn't feel it, but because she felt it completely, and some things are meant to be carried forward, not turned around to examine in the light. Her phone buzzed. Another hospital. A different ward. A patient request, overnight support, elderly woman, family unavailable. Denise read it. Kept walking. Toward the elevator. Toward the exit. Toward the next room where someone was waiting for a person to stay. The envelope was on the table when she walked in. Plain. White. Her name on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. Careful, slightly labored, the handwriting of someone writing in a language that was not their first. The letters were correct, but the pressure was uneven, like each one had been placed there with deliberate effort. Denise Walker. She stood in the doorway of the small hospital family room where Min Jae had asked her to meet him and looked at the envelope on the table and did not move for a full 3 seconds. That was all she allowed herself. Then she walked in. Min Jae was standing near the window on the far side. He was not in the suit anymore. He had changed. A simpler shirt, no tie, the specific look of a man who had been awake for more than 24 hours and had stopped managing his appearance because something more important had taken over. His hands were at his sides. He looked like he had been standing there for a while. He looked at the envelope. "It was in my personal files in Seoul," he said. "My assistant FedExed it last night when I called. It arrived an hour ago." Denise came to the table. She looked at her name again. "She wrote it 3 weeks before she died," he said. "I found it in the estate correspondence with a note from the hospital that said it had been designated for personal delivery to you. When you couldn't be located through the ward records, it came to the estate." A pause. "It came to me. And you read it." "Yes. But you kept it." He was quiet. "I kept it," he said. "I told myself it was because we couldn't locate you." That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. Denise looked at him. "The whole truth," she said. He took a breath. "The whole truth is that I read it and I understood what it meant. What it said about what I had done. And I wasn't ready to face that." He held her gaze. "So I filed it. I kept it. And I didn't try very hard to find you." The room was very still. Outside in the corridor, the hospital moved. Wheels and footsteps and the far-off sound of a television from a patient's room. Ordinary sounds. Completely indifferent to what was happening in here. Denise looked at the envelope. She reached out and picked it up. The paper was slightly heavier than standard. The kind that used to be more common before everything became digital. She turned it over. The back was sealed with a small sticker, a red circle, hand-pressed, slightly off-center. She opened it carefully. One sheet inside. Both sides covered in the same labored handwriting. And below the Korean text, a second section, in English. Translated. The English was slightly formal in the way of someone who has been precise about getting it right. She read it. She read it twice. She did not read it aloud. Min Jae did not ask her to. When she set it down, she was quiet for a moment. Just a moment. Then she reached into the envelope again and found the second item, the keepsake the hospital notation had mentioned. Small. Wrapped in a piece of silk fabric, blue, folded neatly. She unwrapped it. A jade bracelet. Simple. Old. The kind passed through families over generations, the jade smooth from years of wear, the color a deep, even green. Denise held it in her palm. "It was her mother's," Min Jae said. His voice was different now. Lower. "She wore it every day until she was hospitalized. She gave it to the ward staff to keep safe during treatment." He stopped. "It should have been given to family. That's what tradition would say. That's what every cultural expectation would say." He looked at the bracelet in Denise's hand. "She gave it to you instead." Denise closed her fingers around it slowly. She felt the weight of it, the warmth it had absorbed from the silk, the long history carried in something so small. She looked at Min Jae. "She was trying to tell you something," Denise said. "Not just me." He nodded once. The nod of a man who understood and had been sitting with that understanding for however long the envelope had been in his possession. "She was telling me what I had thrown away," he said, "and that she had found a way to give it back anyway." Silence. Then Denise said, "I'm going to keep it." "I know," he said. "Not because I need validation. Not because it proves anything about what happened. But because she meant it for me and she was right to mean it for me." "Yes," he said. "She was." He moved to the table. Sat down across from her. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. The tired that comes from finally stopping the management of something that took enormous energy to maintain. I've spent 15 years making decisions from a position, he said. What does the family need? What does the company need? What does the image need? He looked at his hands on the table. In Seoul, when I walked into that room and saw you, I didn't see you. I saw a variable. Something to be optimized for the situation I was managing. He paused. My grandmother saw a person. A specific person. And I removed that person because she disrupted my composition of the room. Denise watched him. The composition of the room, she repeated. Yes. That's an honest way to say it. I've been trying to be honest today, he said. I'm not sure I'm good at it yet. Something almost like humor crossed Denise's face. Barely. Just at the corner. You're doing better than this morning, she said. He looked at her. And for the first time since she had entered this man's orbit, first in Seoul, and now here, the air between them was neither combative nor formal nor loaded with the weight of what had been done. It was just two people at a table. Tired. A long way from where they had started. Then Min Jae's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His expression shifted. It's Lim, he said. Denise went still. He's calling you directly? No. Min Jae turned the phone so she could see the screen. Not a call. A message. From a number she didn't recognize, forwarded to him by Catherine Hale with a single line of her own text above it. Catherine's text. You need to see this before it goes public. He sent it to 3 journalists an hour ago. Below it, the forwarded message. A statement. Attributed to David Lim. Professionally worded. Precise. Denise read it. Her chest went cold. Not because of what it said about Min Jae. Because of what it said about her. It didn't use the word disgraced again. It was smarter than that. It used language that implied without asserting. It referenced the nursing complaint as still under review. It noted the relationship between Denise and Min Jae as unexplained and ongoing. It raised the question, without answering it, of whether a nurse with ties to a CEO under investigation could be considered an impartial party in any medical setting. It was designed to survive a retraction. Because even after the complaint was formally withdrawn, this statement would remain in search results. In archives. In the spaces between facts where implication lived permanently. Denise set the phone down. She looked at the bracelet in her hand. She looked at the bracelet in her hand. She thought about Soon-hee writing in careful English. About the effort that took. About what it meant for an old woman in a hospital bed to be that deliberate about getting something to the right person. She thought about 12 years of building a record that told the truth about who she was. And she thought about a man who had decided that her name was a useful instrument. She looked at Min Jae. How many journalists? She said. 3. All with major outlets. How long ago? An hour. She nodded slowly. Then we have about 2 hours before someone runs it, she said. She picked up her own phone. Called Carmen. While it rang, she looked out the window at the gray morning coming in. A new day. Arriving indifferently. The way days always did, carrying whatever you put in them. Carmen answered. I saw it, Carmen said before Denise could speak. Can we move? Already moving, Carmen said. But Denise, there's something else. Something he included in the journalist package that I don't think he expected us to have access to. Denise waited. He included a copy of the original nursing complaint as supporting documentation, Carmen said. The altered version. The one we already have the forensic comparison for. So he just gave us documented proof that he distributed a fabricated record to the press. To 3 members of the press, Carmen said. Yes, he did. Denise was quiet for 1 second. Then, file everything. Tonight. Don't wait for morning. By 6 in the morning, David Lim had a problem. He simply didn't know it yet. Denise knew this because Carmen had told her, and Carmen had told her because the first filing had gone through the federal courts at 4:47 a.m. Defamation, distribution of fabricated medical records, tortious interference with professional standing. 3 causes of action. Clean. Documented. supported by forensic evidence that had been prepared before Lim had made the decision to send his journalist package. He had handed them the rope. Denise sat in the chair beside Haun's bed in the thin early morning light and thought about that. About the particular quality of arrogance that leads a person to believe their strategy is complete when they have only considered the moves of people less prepared than themselves. She was not less prepared. She was simply quieter about her preparation. Haun was sleeping. The oxygen mask had been removed an hour ago. Her color was good. Her breathing was even. Dr. Reyes had been in at 5:30 and had used the word discharge and had said tomorrow morning with a confidence that meant it was no longer a question. The room felt different in the early hours. Smaller. More honest. The daytime versions of people, the composed wife, the managing husband, the woman holding her professional dignity together under pressure, those versions hadn't arrived yet. There was just the sleeping child and the woman who had stayed. The door opened quietly. Eugene. She came in without the coat, without the heels. She was wearing what appeared to be clothes she had slept in, or tried to sleep in, somewhere in the hospital. Her face was clean of makeup. She looked younger, more visible. She looked at Haun first. Always Haun first, Denise had noticed. Whatever else she was, whatever she had done, the child was the North Star her eyes found without calculation. Then she looked at Denise. She pulled the second chair close to the bed. Not the foot of the bed this time. Beside it. Beside Denise. She sat down. She didn't speak immediately. They sat in the early morning quiet together, the two of them, the sleeping child between them. Then Eugene said, "I grew up in Incheon." Denise waited. "My father drove delivery vehicles. My mother cleaned offices at night." She said it the way facts sound when someone has spent years deciding whether or not to say them and has finally decided it doesn't matter anymore. "I was the first person in my family to leave Korea. The first to build anything that had a name other people recognized." Denise listened. "When I met Min Jae, I understood immediately what he represented. I'm not ashamed of that. I was 26 and I had been surviving on strategy my entire life, and he was an opportunity that also happened to become something real." She looked at Haun. "But somewhere in the building of it, I became afraid in a way I couldn't name. Not afraid of poverty. I had already survived that. Afraid of invisibility. Afraid of being removed." The word removed sat in the air. Denise felt it. "When I saw Haun reach for you," Eugene said, "I felt it like a verdict. I know that's not rational. She was sick and you had been there all night and I hadn't. The logic was simple. But it didn't feel simple." She paused. "It felt like evidence of something I had been afraid was true. That I had been so occupied building the structure of our life that I had missed the life inside it." Denise said nothing for a moment. Then, "That fear is real." Eugene looked at her. "But what you did with it," Denise said carefully, "was put it on me. As if removing me would remove the feeling." "Yes," Eugene said. "Quiet. I know that now." "You knew it then," Denise said. Not harshly. Just precisely. Eugene didn't argue. "I knew it then," she said. "And I did it anyway. Because I'm very good at doing what needs to be done and separating the doing from the knowing." She pressed her lips together briefly. "It's a useful skill until it isn't." Haun shifted. Both women looked at her. She settled without waking. "The complaint will be formally withdrawn today," Eugene said. "My attorney filed the withdrawal at midnight on my behalf. Not Min Jae's. Mine." Denise looked at her. "I didn't know that," she said. "I didn't tell Min Jae either," Eugene said. "It was mine to undo, not his." Something shifted slightly in the space between them. Not forgiveness. It was too early for forgiveness and Eugene hadn't asked for it, which Denise respected more than she would have respected a request. Forgiveness arrived on its own schedule and couldn't be accelerated by apology alone. But something had moved. A door that had been fully closed was now open by an inch. "Lim filed a statement last night," Denise said. "To 3 journalists." Eugene's face stilled. "What kind of statement?" Denise told her the substance of it. Watched Eugene's face as she heard it. The careful insinuation, the still under review framing, the implied relationship between Denise and Min-jae. When Denise finished, Eugene was looking at the floor. "He used what I gave him," she said. Flat. And then kept going. "Yes. He built something I didn't authorize." "You gave him the foundation," Denise said. "He built the house." Eugene looked up. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I've already done it," Denise said. "My attorney filed a federal action at 4:47 this morning. Defamation. Distribution of fabricated records. Tortious interference." She paused. "He sent the altered complaint to the journalists as supporting documentation, which means he distributed a document we can prove was fabricated. He handed us the evidence." Something moved across Eugene's face. Not relief. Not pleasure at Lim's mistake. Something more complicated. The look of a woman understanding the full consequence of a chain she had started. "You were always going to fight back," Eugene said. "I was always going to stand my ground," Denise said. "There's a difference." Haun opened her eyes. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, then turned her head and saw both of them sitting beside her and looked back and forth between them with a calm assessment of a child measuring a situation she couldn't fully name. "You're both here," she said. "We are," Denise said. Haun appeared to consider the significance of this. "Are you friends?" she asked. Denise and Eugene looked at each other. A long pause. "We're figuring that out," Denise said. Haun nodded as though that were a perfectly satisfying answer. Then she said, "I'm hungry. Real food. Not the paste." Eugene made a sound. Not quite a laugh. Close to one. The first real sound Denise had heard from her that wasn't managed. "I'll find something," Eugene said. She stood. She looked at Denise before she left. One look. No words. But Denise understood the weight of it. She nodded. Eugene left. Haun looked at Denise. "She seems different this morning," she said. "People can be different," Denise said. "Even adults?" "Especially adults," Denise said. "It just takes longer." Haun seemed to find that enormously reassuring. She settled back against her pillow. And Denise's phone buzzed. Carmen again. One line. "Lim's attorney just contacted mine. He wants to talk settlement before the filing becomes public record." She said no to the settlement before Carmen finished the sentence. Not angrily. Not as a performance. As a simple, considered position that she had arrived at before the offer was ever made. Because she had learned long ago that the moment you accept a quiet settlement on a matter of public record, the public record stays dirty. The money lands in your account, and the lie stays in the system. Clean on one side. Contaminated on the other. She told Carmen, the record gets corrected publicly or it doesn't get corrected at all. Carmen said she'd relay that. Denise put her phone away. The morning had moved to 8 o'clock. The hospital was shifting into its daytime rhythm. The floor was busier. The sounds from the corridor were different. Purposeful, energetic, the particular frequency of a place that had moved from nighttime survival mode into daytime function. Haun had eaten. Not paste. Eugene had come back with a container of doenjang jjigae from a Korean restaurant 2 blocks away that apparently delivered early. She had set it on the tray beside Haun without ceremony. Haun had looked at it, looked at her mother, and said nothing for a moment. Then she had eaten 3/4 of it. Eugene had watched her eat with an expression that had nothing calculated in it. Min-jae arrived at 8:15. He looked at the empty food container. Looked at Eugene. Then at Haun. "You brought her food," he said to Eugene. "She was hungry," Eugene said. Simply. Min-jae looked at his daughter. Haun looked back at him. "It was good," she said. "Grandma's level." Something cracked open in Min-jae's face at that. Quietly. The mention of the grandmother, easy and casual in his daughter's mouth, landing in a way it hadn't been able to land yesterday. He sat beside her. "I need to talk to you," he said to Haun. Direct. The way he had learned, Denise thought, from watching what directness looked like in this room over the past 24 hours. About why I wasn't here when you got sick. Ha-eun looked at him seriously. Okay, she said. Denise stood. I'll give you. Stay, Ha-eun said immediately. Denise looked at Min-jae. He looked at his daughter and then back at Denise. Please, he said. She sat back down. Min-jae looked at his hands. Then at Ha-eun. I was in a meeting, he said. In Tokyo. And when I found out you were sick, it took me time to get back. Time I should have shortened. He paused. I told myself the meeting couldn't wait. That was not true. I told myself everything was being handled. That was also not fully true. He looked at her directly. The real truth is that I have spent a long time telling myself that providing for you and being present for you are the same thing. And they are not. Ha-eun listened to this with complete attention. 7 years old. Sitting with a conversation most adults deflected from. I know, she said. Min-jae looked at her. You know. You're always providing, she said. The word in her mouth sounded borrowed. She had heard it somewhere, absorbed it, deployed it with the accuracy children achieve when they have been listening harder than the adults realized. But Ms. Walker was just here. Min-jae looked at Denise. Denise looked at Ha-eun. That's very clearly said, Denise told the child. Ha-eun shrugged one shoulder. It's true. Min-jae was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. It is. He reached over and took Ha-eun's hand. Held it properly. The way he had begun to hold it since the previous night. Not the careful, uncertain touch of a man managing a situation, but the grip of a father who had decided that presence was not optional. Ha-eun let him hold it. Then she leaned her head slightly toward him. Just slightly. The smallest possible movement of concession. The kind children make when they have decided to forgive something they are not yet fully naming. Eugene was standing near the window. She was watching them, her husband and her daughter, with an expression that mixed grief and relief in proportions Denise couldn't fully measure. The grief of recognizing how much distance had grown. The relief of watching it begin to close. Min-jae looked at Eugene. A long look between them. The kind that didn't need witnesses. Denise shifted her attention to the monitor above the bed, giving them the privacy of her not watching. She heard Min-jae say, quietly in Korean, something short. She heard Eugene respond. Also short. Also quiet. She didn't need to understand the words. She understood the register of them. The register of two people who had been circling a wound for a very long time and had finally decided to look at it directly. Dr. Reyes came in at 9. Ha-eun was cleared for discharge. Tomorrow morning. Final monitoring through the day, one more set of labs, and she could go home. Ha-eun received this news with the particular relief of a child who had been ready to leave since she woke up but had been too polite to say so aggressively. When Dr. Reyes left, Min-jae looked at Denise. There's something I need to do today, he said. Outside this hospital. I'd like to ask for 2 more hours of your time. Not as Ha-eun's nurse. As... He stopped. Chose the next word carefully. As a witness. Denise looked at him. A witness to what? She asked. I'm going to the press, he said. Not through an attorney. Not through a statement. Directly. In front of a camera. He paused. I'm going to correct the record on your name publicly. And I'm going to do it in a way that makes it harder to bury than the original headline. Denise was quiet. That's your decision to make, she said. Not mine. I know, he said. I'm not asking your permission. I'm asking if you're willing to stand beside me when I do it. Because you're standing there says something that my words alone can't say. The room waited. Eugene was watching her. Ha-eun was watching her. Min-jae was watching her. Denise thought about the envelope on the table. The jade bracelet currently in the small zippered pocket of her bag. The letter written in careful English by a woman who had wanted to make sure something reached the right person regardless of the obstacles between them. She thought about 12 years of a record that told the truth. She thought about the word disgraced in a headline that was already in the world. 2 hours, she said. Min-jae nodded. He stood. Then stopped. Before we go, he said. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He produced a small folded document. He set it on the tray beside Haun. Denise looked at it. Her name was on it. "What is that?" she said. "A formal letter of acknowledgement," he said. "From me. Personally. Documenting what happened in Seoul, what I did, and what your record actually showed during your time in that ward. Signed. Notarized." He paused. "You can do whatever you want with it. Frame it. File it. Put it in the same box as whatever soon he left you. Or set it on fire." He looked at her steadily. "But it exists. And it says what it says. In writing. With my name on it." Denise looked at the document. She didn't pick it up yet. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I've been carrying it in my jacket for 3 hours," he said. "And I kept finding reasons to wait. And I finally understood that waiting was just another version of the thing I've been doing wrong." She picked it up, held it, folded it exactly as it had been, and put it in her bag beside the bracelet. "All right," she said. "Let's go. This channel is for women who have learned the hard way that dignity matters. If that sounds like you, I'd love to have you here." The cameras were already there. Not because Min Jae had called a press conference. He hadn't. He had called one journalist, a woman named Patricia Osei, who had covered the Choi Enterprises story from the beginning and who had, according to Catherine Hale, been the only member of the press to call the company's communications office and ask for comment before running anything. The kind of journalist who still believed that calling for comment was not a formality but a practice. Patricia had brought a camera operator. 2 other journalists had apparently followed, because word moved fast in the city, and a CEO calling a direct press meeting outside the scheduled board framework was not something that stayed quiet long. They met in a small conference space at a hotel 3 blocks from the hospital. Neutral ground. Not the hospital. Haun's privacy mattered. Not Choi Enterprises headquarters. That would look like corporate management. Neutral. Min Jae stood at the front of the room. Denise stood slightly to his left. Not beside him as a decoration. Not behind him as support. At an angle that said she was there by her own choice, present on her own terms. She was dressed the same as she had been for 36 hours. She had taken 20 minutes in the hospital bathroom to make herself presentable. She was not going to apologize for any of that. Min Jae began. He did not read from notes. She had expected him to have notes. He didn't. He spoke in the direct, unhurried way of someone who had decided the truth was the preparation. He said, a false complaint had been filed against Denise Walker using medical records that had been altered after the fact. He said the original records had been located and forensically compared. He said the complaint was fabricated in coordination with an effort to destabilize his company's leadership. He said that Denise Walker's record was clean. Completely. And that the word used in the initial press reporting was not only inaccurate but had been deliberately sourced from a document that the person who sourced it knew to be false. He named David Lim. Directly. With the specificity of someone who had made a decision and was standing behind it with both feet. Then he paused. He looked at Denise. She looked back at him. "I also want to say something that is not about the legal situation," he said. He turned back to the cameras. 6 years ago in Seoul, I had Ms. Walker removed from my grandmother's care. Not for any professional failing. Not for any documented reason. Because her presence disrupted what I thought the room should look like. He paused. My grandmother specifically requested her. She was the best care provider my grandmother had in the last year of her life. And I removed her without acknowledgement, without explanation, and without any recognition that she was a person deserving of basic respect. He stopped. That was wrong. Not wrong in the way people say things were wrong when they mean inconvenient. Wrong in a way that I have thought about for 6 years and am only now saying directly. The room was very quiet. One of the other journalists, not Patricia, shifted. Started to ask something. Min Jae held up one hand. Briefly. "I'm not finished," he said. Quiet. Absolute. The journalist stopped. "Denise Walker stayed with my daughter all night when I was not there," he said. "She did it without being asked, without extra compensation, and without any expectation of acknowledgement. She did it because a child was scared and she was present. That is who she is. And it is categorically not who I was when I made the decision I made 6 years ago. He looked at the camera directly. The record correction will be filed through every relevant institution today. My personal acknowledgement of the Seoul incident is on record with my signature, and the legal action against David Lim for distribution of fabricated documentation is proceeding through federal court. He stepped back. Patricia Osei spoke first. Ms. Walker, she said, would you like to add anything? Denise considered this. She stepped slightly forward. My record is my record, she said. It tells the truth about 12 years of work. I don't need this room or this moment to validate it. She paused. What I do need, and what every nurse, every care worker, every person in a service profession needs, is for their record to remain accurate, not subject to alteration by whoever has access to a system and a grievance. She looked directly at Patricia's camera. The complaint against me was built on a lie placed inside a medical record. If that can be done to me, it can be done to anyone. And that is the story here. Not me specifically. The story is that fabricated professional records are a weapon that gets used disproportionately against people who have less institutional power. And it should not be easy to do. It should not go unchallenged. And today it did not. She stepped back. Patricia was already writing. The other journalists were writing. It took 22 minutes. When they stepped outside, the morning had moved to midday. The street outside the hotel was an ordinary street doing ordinary things. Taxis, coffee cups, people on phones. Min Jae stood beside her on the sidewalk. Thank you, he said. You did that, she said. I was just present. That's all any of this needed, he said. From the beginning. Just presence. He said it, and she could hear that he meant it more than one way. She looked at him. Go be with your daughter, she said. He nodded. He started to walk away. Then stopped. Turned back. The acknowledgement letter, he said. I had a copy sent to the Korean Medical Association as well. To your file in their international registry. So it lives there permanently. Not just in your possession. He paused. I should have done more to protect your record 6 years ago. I can't undo that. But I can make sure the correction is louder than the original error. Denise looked at him. She did not say thank you. She nodded once. The nod of someone who has received something they were owed. Not a gift. Not a favor. Something owed. And who has accepted it with exactly the right amount of dignity. Neither too much gratitude nor too little acknowledgement. He understood. He walked back toward the hospital. Denise stood on the sidewalk for a moment. The jade bracelet was in her bag. The letter from Soon-hee was in her bag. The acknowledgement document was in her bag. All of it carried. All of it hers now. She looked down the street. Then she walked. Eugene found her in the hospital cafeteria. Denise had not expected to be found. She had come back to check on Haun's final monitoring results and had stopped for coffee. Real coffee, the first unhurried cup she'd had in 2 days, and had been sitting at a corner table by the window watching the street outside with the particular quality of attention that comes when you have been intensely focused for a long time and your mind is finally allowing itself to just observe without needing to process. Eugene came in, saw her, and paused at the entrance. Not calculating. Just pausing. The pause of someone deciding whether to intrude. Denise looked up. Nodded toward the chair across from her. Eugene came over, got coffee from the counter, black, no ceremony, and sat down. For a while neither of them spoke. The cafeteria was half full. Families at different stages of hospital time, the early, frightened stage, the waiting stage, the relieved and exhausted stage. The whole range of what this building held sitting around them in ordinary clothes under fluorescent light. I watched it, Eugene said. The press meeting. From my phone. Okay, Denise said. He named Lim directly. She turned her coffee cup slightly. He didn't have to do that in a public forum. Catherine probably advised against it. Probably, Denise said. He did it anyway. Yes. Eugene looked at her coffee. He's changed, she said. Not with surprise. With something more careful. The tone of someone reassessing something they thought they had fully mapped. People can be different, Denise said. You told me that this morning. Eugene looked up. I said adults take longer. You're both still adults, Denise said. A pause. Then Eugene said, I contacted a family therapist this morning. For Haun. For all three of us. She said it matter-of-factly. Not as a confession. As an action taken. Min Jae doesn't know yet. I'll tell him today. Denise said nothing. Just listened. I've spent 15 years managing our household the same way I manage a strategy, Eugene said. Efficiently. From a distance. Anticipating problems and eliminating them before they required emotional engagement. She looked out the window. It worked for a long time. And then it didn't. And I didn't notice when it stopped working because I was still executing the strategy. Haun noticed, Denise said. Haun noticed, Eugene repeated. Quietly. Another silence. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Eugene said. Not today. I don't think today is the right time for that conversation, and I don't think you should feel any pressure toward it. She looked at Denise directly. What I'm telling you is that I understand what I did. Not partially. Fully. I put a lie inside your professional record. I used a system that is supposed to protect patients and practitioners, and I turned it into a weapon. Against someone who had done nothing to me except exist in a way that frightened me. She paused. That is the full truth of it. And I am sitting with it. Denise looked at her. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, the thing about being used as a weapon, she said carefully, is that it doesn't just damage the target. It damages the person holding it. She held Eugene's gaze. You handed yourself to David Lim. Your access, your information, your fear. And he used all of it for something that had nothing to do with protecting you. Eugene nodded. You already know that, Denise said. I knew it when he stopped returning my calls 3 days ago, Eugene said. When the second file appeared and I didn't recognize anything in it. That's when I understood I had been managed. A pause. I've spent my whole life making sure I was never managed. And I let it happen anyway because I let fear make the decision. Denise looked at her coffee. Fear does that, she said. You don't seem afraid of anything, Eugene said. Denise looked up. I was afraid in that corridor yesterday evening, she said. I stood at the window at the end of the hall and I thought about walking away. About leaving all of this behind and protecting myself by removing myself. Eugene looked at her. But you didn't, she said. No. Why? Denise thought about Haun's voice. The way it had sounded in the dark of the previous night. The complete, uncomplicated need in it. Because someone needed me to stay, she said. And that was bigger than my fear. Eugene was quiet for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, I don't think anyone has ever needed me to stay. Not in that way. She looked at her hands on the table. They've needed what I could provide. What I could manage. What I could build. But just staying. Being present with nothing else attached to it. She stopped. I don't know how to do that. Haun can teach you, Denise said. Children are good at that. They don't need the managed version. They just need you in the room. Eugene looked at the table for a moment. Then she said, Would you come to dinner? Sometime. When Haun is home and recovered. Just dinner. She said it awkwardly. Like the sentence was in a language she was still learning. Not as anything formal. Not as an apology event. Just dinner. Denise looked at her. At this woman who had done her real harm and was sitting in a cafeteria chair without her coat and her strategy and her composed surface, asking for something she clearly did not know how to ask for. I'll think about it, Denise said. Eugene nodded. That was enough. She stood, picked up her coffee, started to leave. Eugene, Denise said. She stopped. The therapist, Denise said. Good decision. Eugene looked at her. Something in her face, not quite a smile. Something quieter and more real than a smile. She left. Denise sat with her coffee. Outside the window, a woman was walking a dog past the hospital entrance, the dog investigating every corner of the sidewalk with complete commitment, and the woman was just standing there letting him take his time, and the ordinary patience of that small scene was somehow the most restful thing Denise had looked at in 2 days. Her phone buzzed. Patricia Osei. Ms. Walker, the story is running in the morning edition. Full correction. Your record included. I want you to know I've confirmed the forensic documentation independently through my own source. This is not going to be a he-said situation. The record is the record. Denise read it. Set the phone down. Picked up her coffee. Finished it. Ha-eun went home on a Thursday morning. Not dramatically. Not with speeches. She put on her own clothes, jeans and a yellow sweatshirt with a small bear on the pocket, the specific outfit of a child who had decided exactly what she was wearing before anyone could suggest otherwise, and she sat on the edge of the bed while Denise did the final check. Blood pressure. Temperature. Oxygen. All good. All the way the numbers were supposed to go. Min-jae stood by the door with the overnight bag. Eugene had Ha-eun's shoes in her hand. She sat on the edge of the bed beside her daughter and put them on. Ha-eun let her. She leaned slightly against Eugene's arm while the laces were tied, and Eugene sat very still and did not rush the moment. Denise noticed. She made her final chart notation and set the clipboard on the tray. Everything looks good, she said. Dr. Reyes will follow up in a week. Watch the breathing for the first 48 hours at home. Any laboring or change in rate, call immediately. Otherwise, she just needs rest and regular food. Min-jae nodded. Ha-eun looked at Denise. Are you working today? She asked. I'm starting a new shift in about an hour, Denise said. A different patient? A different patient. Ha-eun considered this. Do they know they're lucky? She asked. Denise looked at this child. At the complete, unself-conscious sincerity in the question. I'll make sure they feel taken care of, she said. Ha-eun nodded as though that were a satisfying answer and jumped off the bed. Min-jae picked up the bag. Eugene stood. The three of them were moving toward the door when Ha-eun stopped. She turned around. Walked directly back to Denise. She was at about chest height. Small, deliberate, absolutely certain of what she was doing. She put her arms around Denise's waist and held on. Denise went still for just a moment. Then she put her hand on the back of Ha-eun's head. Held her there. The way you hold something small and certain and completely genuine. Thank you for staying, Ha-eun said. Muffled against Denise's side. Thank you for asking me to, Denise said. Ha-eun let go. Stepped back. Turned around and walked to her parents as if she had completed a necessary thing and it was time to move on. Min-jae looked at Denise over his daughter's head. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then said simply, the story she left you. The poem. Denise waited. It's a classical Chinese poem, he said. My grandmother studied classical literature for 40 years. She chose that specific poem for a reason. He paused. It's about travelers who meet briefly at a crossing point, who change each other without meaning to, and who carry each other forward even after the crossing is done. The corridor outside was ordinary, moving, indifferent. Denise stood inside the room for a moment longer. She thought about a prescription slip in a small box, carried across 3 moves and 2 countries without knowing what it said, without needing to know. She had carried it anyway because it had been given with care and that had been enough to make it worth keeping. Now she knew. She looked at Min-jae. She was a wise woman, Denise said. The wisest person I've ever known, he said. And I spent years not understanding that. He looked at his daughter, who was standing in the doorway with the focused impatience of a 7-year-old who had been in a hospital for 3 days and was ready to see something other than linoleum. I won't make that mistake with her, he said. Quietly. Not to Denise specifically. More the way you say something out loud so that the saying of it makes it real. He took Ha-eun's hand. Eugene met Denise's eyes one last time. The look was brief, uncluttered. It said something that the dinner invitation had already begun to say. That the cafeteria conversation had continued. That was still incomplete, as honest things often are, but was real and moving in a direction that neither of them could fully map yet. Denise nodded. They left. She stood in the empty room for a moment. The monitors were off. The bed was stripped. The tray table had the indentations of the past 3 days. A cup ring, a chart mark, the slight displacement of a surface that had held things and now held nothing. She picked up the clipboard, turned off the light, walked out. The corridor was ordinary. The floor was ordinary. The elevator was ordinary. All of it exactly the same as it had been when she first walked through it 38 hours ago, following a sound she had heard through a door, a child crying softly in a room where no one was coming. She pressed the button for 3. A different floor. A different room. A different patient. The elevator opened. She walked in. In her bag, 1 jade bracelet. 1 letter in careful English. 1 notarized document with a man's signature on it. 1 poem about travelers at a crossing point. All of it carried. All of it hers. The elevator closed. She thought about Soon-hee's hands. About the 2 words she had said in that Seoul hospital room. Words that had traveled across 6 years and an ocean and had finally landed where they were supposed to land. Forgive him. She had. Not for him. Not to be gracious or generous or any of the things people expected forgiveness to look like from the outside. For herself. Because carrying a wound that someone else inflicted was giving them continued tenancy in her body. And she had evicted them. Quietly. Years ago. Before she even knew all of this would happen. The elevator opened on 3. She stepped out. A nurse at the station looked up. Room 312 has been waiting. Elderly woman. Family couldn't come in today. Denise nodded. She walked down the corridor. She reached 312. Put her hand on the door. Paused. Not with doubt. Not with exhaustion. With the particular steadiness of a person who knows exactly who she is and exactly what she is walking into and has never needed anyone's permission to walk forward. She opened the door. She went in. She sat down. She stayed. Because that is what she did. That is who she was. And some people, the ones the world does not always see, the ones who show up in the rooms where no one is watching, the ones who hold hands through the dark, those people are the ones who hold everything together. Quietly. Without applause. Completely. If you've ever had to stand alone to protect your dignity, this channel was made for you. And if this story moved something in you, don't leave alone. Bring someone with you. Subscribe and stay. Thank you for watching Afro Korean Tales and Stories. As we close this story, I want to say something to the women watching. Some of you have lived through moments like this. Moments where you had to stand alone. Moments where you chose dignity over comfort. Moments where you refused to be bought, silenced, or pushed aside. That kind of strength doesn't always make noise. But it changes rooms. If you are a woman who believes respect is worth more than money, if you believe character still matters, if you believe dignity should never be negotiated, then this channel was made for you. I tell stories about women who stand firm. Women who earn respect without begging for it. Women who remind powerful people that integrity cannot be purchased. If that speaks to you, I invite you to subscribe and become part of this community. And if this story touched you, comment the word dignity below. I read your comments, and they help these stories reach more women like you. Until the next story, remember, not every powerful person leads with honor, but every strong woman carries it within her. I'll see you in the next one.